welcome to Bibliophiles Anonymous, episode 42. I'm Denise.
And I'm Jess.
And this week we promise we're not going to talk for an insane amount of time.
Okay, we probably shouldn't make that promise because Half-Blood Prince, there's a lot of stuff that happens in this book.
Okay, granted, that is true. And I have heard from a couple of people that even though last week's episode was probably our longest episode yet, I had this picture in my head of people trying to get through it and listen to it and just be like, oh, come on, get over it, move on. But they said it was actually really, really fun and it didn't drag on too long, so that made me feel better. So
people can actually listen to us. It's exciting.
Yeah, But tonight should be a little bit better since we're only talking about one book instead of 3 books or 2 books.
Yeah.
So this should be a lot more manageable, I think.
Yeah, I think it will be.
So, is there anything else that you're reading right now?
I am. I started reading a book called Charmed.
Mm-hmm.
Charming. That's the name of it. By Elliot James. It's a ARC from NetGalley. And so far, I really, really like it. Basically, it kind of takes the idea of Prince Charming and shakes it up a little.
Okay.
Basically, it's not... Prince Charming wasn't one person, it's a family, and they're knights of a sort, sort of a Knights Templar kind of thing, but they're more supernatural than that. They defend supernatural beings so long as these supernatural beings aren't trying to cause harm to humans.
Okay. And
the main character is a Charming, but he's not allowed to be a part of the Knights anymore, and he's having to hide from them. Because his mother was bitten by a werewolf while she was pregnant with him.
Okay.
And she had him before she had before she changed the first time. So every month around the full moon, things get kind of crazy for him, but he doesn't actually turn into a wolf.
Huh.
Yeah, it's really weird, but, he's not allowed to be. So he's on the run and he's hiding, and all this stuff has started happening in the city where he's, hiding out, and it's pretty good. And I'm kind of falling in love with him.
Oh, no.
So there's another one from my list.
We're going to have a whole other episode about that before long.
Yeah. But I like it because you know how I am. I like snark. And there's a lot of that in this book. It's really good. And I will be writing a full review of it closer to time for it to be released. It doesn't actually come out until September 24th.
Oh, okay. So you're going to hold off on that a little bit.
It'll be like the first week of September when I post my review.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, let's see. I finished reading Anna Dressed in Blood by Kendra Blake, and that book, it was really good, but it's more in the young adult horror genre than just young adult fantasy, which I was not quite expecting. I mean, I knew it was a ghost story, but yeah. I didn't realize quite how much violence was going to be in it. And some of the scenes, basically, it's about, I think I mentioned it before, it's about this young man, he's probably 18 or so, because he's still in high school. I think he's a senior in high school. But he travels around, and he's changed schools quite a bit because he's a ghost hunter. Although if you make any comparison to the Ghostbusters, he will go off on you. But what he does and what his father did before him is he has an athame that was his father's, and they hear about particularly violent ghosts that have been attacking, the living, and some of them have even been killing living people, and he goes after them and basically kills them again so that they go on to the next place and they leave everybody else alone. So he hears about this one named Anna who haunts this old house, and she's kind of different from the normal ghosts that he's had to deal with because she's a lot more substantial, she's a lot more violent. He said that she almost seems like a goddess of death at times, and she's really kind of scary, and some of the things that she does is a little bit gory, which I was not quite expecting. This is not a book that I should have been, let me just say, it's not a book I should have been reading right before bed one night.
No, it doesn't sound like it. It
wasn't, it was a bad choice. Just to say. I had some really weird dreams after that one. But
it kind of sounds more like supernatural the TV show than it does Ghostbusters.
It was really good. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought, because it's a lot more complex than I was expecting it to be, which that sounds kind of bad, but it was really really good. And let's see, I'm doing a reread of Paper Towns by John Green, which is probably one of my favorite books. And it's just been a while since I've read it, and I needed something to read that I didn't have to really think too hard.
Yeah.
Just because it's one of those books that it's easy to kind of get lost in, but you don't have to. It's not a fantasy. It's more your mainstream young adult, and there's a little bit of a mystery behind it, but it's not anything. I don't want to say you don't have to think too hard, because his books are very intelligent. It's about this another senior in high school, a young man, who lives next door to this girl that he's known since they were toddlers, and her name is Margot. And she sneaks up to his bedroom window one night, and they go on this kind of whirlwind adventure that involves her getting revenge on her cheating boyfriend and them breaking into SeaWorld because they live in Orlando. And then the next day she disappears. She runs away from home, and she leaves behind all of these clues that the boy, his name's Quentin, that he has to try and figure out where she went. And so it's about the last part of their senior year where he's trying to find her and trying to figure out all of these clues. So it's a lot of John Green's books. Usually there's a lot of introspection, and this one is probably my favorite of his, because it's just, some of it's really funny, but then at the end it turns into a bit of a tearjerker.
Yeah.
At least nobody dies in this one, which is good.
Well, I also started reading The Silmarillion.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Well, I found this podcast.
Ambitious, are we?
Well, it's not so much that. I found this podcast called The Tolkien Professor. I was browsing the literature section of the podcasts on iTunes, and he's actually a professor at Washington College, and he actually teaches a course on Tolkien.
That's awesome.
Which, yes, I want to go take his class. Well, he's posted all of his class lectures from his Tolkien course from, I think it was 2010? No, 2011. He posted all of his course lectures, so you can follow along and read everything. It's basically like taking the class without actually having to take the class.
Right.
He's also got a fairy course, which is lots of other fairy tale type stuff.
Uh-huh.
One of the things he talks about in that is Sabriel by Garth Nix.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I haven't listened to any of those yet, but he covered the Silmarillion in his Tolkien course, but he also got together a Silmarillion seminar to go more in depth into the Silmarillion, because he didn't get to cover it that much because there was so much to cover.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, there is, and the seminar kind of takes it a chapter at a time, and the titles of the episodes, starting with episode 3, they decided they needed snazzy titles, are so funny, because you have the sharpest tool in the Valinorian shed, and then you have stuff like all my exes live in Valinor, don't let the door hit you on the way out, Fëanor, and we have Círdan the ship wrong, and the yada yada yada.
So he's a snarky Tolkien professor.
How are you going to keep them down on the farm when they've seen Gondolin? Yeah, I mean, they're hilarious. And he's also, I mean, there's so much on his podcast. He also has a segment called Riddles in the Dark, which they started after the Hobbit movie was announced, where they're talking about their predictions of how they're going to do the movie, and, you know, after seeing the trailer and everything. And I haven't actually made it to the episodes after the movie comes out, which I'm excited to get to those, where they actually, you know, sit around and talk about all the things they would change, because I love doing that.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely, if you are a Tolkien fan, you need to look up The Tolkien Professor on iTunes and subscribe, or go to his website, which is the Tolkien Professor, or TolkienProfessor.com.
We'll put a link to his website in the show notes.
Yeah,
People can
and
see it.
I followed him on Twitter. He's also a David Eddings fan.
Oh, yay.
Because when I followed him on Twitter, I tweeted and told him, he followed me back, and I tweeted and told him, you know, thanks for following me back, and he was like, you know, you're welcome. I love your handle. I'm a Eddings fan too. So that was pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. He's one of our people, is what you're saying.
Yes, he is one of our. Okay, he taught a class and covered Sabriel by Garth Nix.
He's one of our people.
Yeah. I was scrolling through looking at all the stuff he did on his fairy course, and I saw Sabriel, and I was like, he's one of us. And I listened to his introductory lecture for the Tolkien course, and he was talking about how important Tolkien specifically and fantasy in general is to literature.
Uh-huh.
Which is something that, me and one of my college lit teachers did not see eye to eye on, because she tried to tell me that Tolkien's Lord of the Rings was not real literature because it was written strictly to entertain and make money.
Yeah, I remember you talking about her.
Yeah, we didn't get along.
Yeah. Can't imagine why.
She never even read it. She just kind of had this dim view of fantasy in general, which is kind of stupid.
Right.
And it always annoyed me that she said that. And to have this guy who is, a professor, I'm pretty sure he's a doctor. Pretty sure he has his doctorate, who teaches Tolkien, an entire course on Tolkien, say how important Tolkien and fantasy are to literature just made my day.
Yeah, I'll bet. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've tried to read the Silmarillion before, but there's just so much information there, and then...
Well, it's not even that there's a lot of information, which there is, but it's so dense.
Yeah, and the way it's written is because... And the reason it's written like that is it's kind of sort of set up to be like the holy book of the elves.
Right.
So it's kind of hoity-toity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to think the way it's written.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping by taking this chapter by chapter and only having to read and think about one chapter at a time and then listening to people talk about it for 2 hours, it'll sink in better. So far, it has gotten to I've come to the conclusion that Melkor is a brat, and that's what caused all the problems.
Well, there you go.
So, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and move into our main discussion, which is, of course, our third episode in our Harry Potter-palooza celebration. Yay! And so tonight we're going to be talking about Book 6, which is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And this is such a good book. I mean, these last three, I think we said this before, these last three books are just so, there's so much going on, and they're all so important to the main storyline. But I did want to mention real quick that we've mentioned before that they're putting out these new book covers.
Yes.
For the 15th anniversary of Sorcerer's Stone. And at San Diego Comic-Con, they released the new cover for Half-Blood Prince. So that was pretty good timing.
So pretty.
It is gorgeous.
I love it.
It's a picture. We have it on our website. So go to www.bibliophiles-anonymous.com and you can see a copy of it there. But the American hardback cover, it has a picture of Harry and Dumbledore looking at the pensive, I believe is what they're doing. But this one also has Harry and Dumbledore, but they're standing at the cliff at the sea, getting ready to go into the cave, and it's just, oh man, that's such an amazing scene in the book anyway. But
yeah, it really is. I mean, it's one of the pivotal scenes in the book. I mean,
well, this book has a lot of pivotal moments, and there's a lot of information to take in this book. And, I mean, let's be honest, this book has probably the most devastating thing of the entire series.
Yes, the first time I read this book, I cried.
Yeah, it's, I mean, and we already had some pretty devastating things happen, but J.K. Rowling's already shown us that she is not afraid to kill off characters, and it doesn't matter if they're characters that we like or don't like, she will do it, and this is one of the ones that proves that nobody's safe.
Mm-hmm.
And basically one of the foundations of the entire wizarding world is just very casually removed from the story. Yeah. And I think it was also one of the things when the book first came out, it was one of the biggest spoiled endings that they've had.
Yeah.
Because you could not go to any website, even if it wasn't strictly about Harry Potter, or even if it was just like any other discussion board, and you would just see like one sentence, and it would just, and because I saw several of them, and luckily I tried to avoid the internet as much as I could when this first came out, because I knew people were talking about there was big spoilers everywhere. It was almost impossible to avoid them unless you avoided the internet completely. But I mean, everywhere you looked, you would just see one sentence, and all it said was, Snape kills Dumbledore.
Yeah.
And for the most part, a lot of people, when they saw that, they're like, no, that's ridiculous. I mean, some people are trolling or something. They're just trying to stir up trouble. But yeah, that was a pretty shocking thing.
It really was, and I've never made a secret of the fact that I don't like Snape.
Right.
He's just, I do believe that he was working against Voldemort the whole time, but it was one of those cases of where he was doing the right thing for the wrong reason.
Right.
And I'm not really much of an ends justifies the means kind of person.
Right.
So it just always it never sat well with me.
No, I mean, I know what you mean. And he's always been such a complicated person. And that was one of the big things, especially leading into book 7. So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But you never really knew for sure what his motives were.
Well, now, I mean, he's a wonderful character. He was wonderfully written. I mean, in the fact that he had so much depth to his personality, it was great.
Yeah.
But I didn't like him.
Right. Well, you're not supposed to.
I mean, he was just, there are some people out there who, sympathize with him and really loved him and thought, oh, it was so great that he did these. And like, no! He's a twit!
Well, I mean, I do sympathize with him to a degree. I mean, basically, he's a product of bullying, an extreme example. But, yeah. I mean, he had a very difficult life and had a lot of traumas. Does that justify him as a grown man treating, a 12-year-old kid the way he does? No, it doesn't. But I can understand. And I understand the people who are all about, oh, well, he's just misunderstood, and that he's kind of this tragic anti-hero, which in some ways he is. But but you're right, he's not a likable person, and he's not supposed to be. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't be such a Snape fangirl if Alan Rickman didn't play him in the movie.
Well, that's true.
That had a big factor, because it's very hard for me to think of the character without thinking of Alan Rickman. And as many of our listeners already know, I have a very age-inappropriate crush on Mr. Rickman. So,
look,
he's just old enough to be my dad. Who cares?
So I was excited when they got him to play Snape. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
So let's start at the beginning, which is when Harry is waiting for Dumbledore to pick him up from the Dursleys.
Yes.
And he doesn't really, he's been afraid to get his hopes up because he's barely had to stay at the Dursleys at all. And so he hadn't packed, and he was just kind of sitting at the window, and then all of a sudden Dumbledore shows up. And this is probably one of the funniest scenes, definitely one of the funniest scenes in this book, but it might be one of the funniest ones in the series, because I love when Dumbledore shows up at the Dursleys' house, and they're all stunned, and they don't quite know what to do with him. And he basically calls them out, killing them with politeness, and calls them out for being such horrible people.
Yes, I love it.
And I love when he pours them drinks, but they refuse to take it, and so the glasses are just like bumping them in the side of the head because they're too stubborn to accept a drink from a wizard.
Yes, I mean, I literally laughed out loud.
That is one of the things I wish they could have put the Dursleys in this movie, because I wanted to see them being assaulted by these little glasses clunking them in the side of the head. That would have just, made my day.
But, they kind of sort of glossed over the whole, as long as you can call the Dursleys home, you're protected thing in the movies.
Right.
We're just gonna not go into...
They didn't really have time to go into it. That just would have been one more plot line that they had to try and tie up, which I guess I can understand. I mean, that is a pretty important thing in the books, but it is something that you can leave out and the story still works. So, I guess that was just one thing that they had to sacrifice. Harry leaves with Dumbledore, and they go to visit a teacher. Well,
Yeah,
he's
and
not a teacher yet, but he's.
I mentioned when we did our quotes podcast, one of my favorite quotes from the Harry Potter books happens from between leaving the Dursleys and going to recruit this new professor. And that is when Dumbledore tells Harry, if I were a Death Eater, I would have been sure to research my own jam preferences before impersonating myself.
Right. Yes.
I so wanted that to be in the movies. I so wanted that in the movie, but it
Yeah,
wasn't.
that would have given Dumbledore a little bit more of the twinkle that he needed, but yeah, that was just another thing that got cut, unfortunately. And it would have been great, but
Yeah.
But there's this new teacher that Dumbledore's trying to recruit named Horace Slughorn, who in the movie is played by Jim Broadbent, who was not walrusy enough for me, to
No,
be
I was
honest.
gonna say he wasn't exactly. I mean, he did a good job, but he didn't look the way I thought he should
Yeah,
have.
because he's described in the book as being extremely round and having a big walrusy mustache, and
He had no facial hair whatsoever.
yeah, so and that would have been something simple. Just throw a mustache on the guy, come on. But that's all right. Uh, and he's hiding out at this Muggle house, and he's been on the run, sort of, because he doesn't want the Death Eaters to find him and try and recruit him over to Voldemort's side. And he finally agrees to come back to Hogwarts, and Harry, of course, assumes that he's going to be the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher because, once again, we don't have one anymore.
Yeah, they haven't. You don't want that job because you ain't gonna keep it more than a year.
Yeah,
You just hope you're not one of the ones that ends up dead.
yeah. It's not a comfortable job. But let's see, is there anything else we need to talk about with Slughorn? Oh,
Well, the way they get him is he liked to collect students, and
he
he liked the really smart ones or the really talented ones, and Dumbledore kind of used Harry as bait.
pretty much.
Harry didn't really do anything except stand there and be uncomfortable.
No, he just stood there and was Harry Potter, the chosen one, which is what everybody's calling him now. And
Is it in the movie? Is it in this movie or is it in one of the Deathly Hallows where he's talking to Hermione and she says something to him and he's like, "But I am the chosen one," and she whacks him with a newspaper?
yeah, that's in this movie.
Okay, that was not in the books, but I'm so glad they put it in there because it was hilarious.
Yeah, cause this is the one where all of the girls want to date him,
Yeah.
and that's when Hermione says, I think they're in the library or something, and she's like, she only wants to date you because you're the chosen one, and Harry's like, well, I am the chosen one. Smack. It's like, right,
Yeah,
sorry.
I love that. It's hilarious.
Everybody needs a Hermione in their life to kind of put you back in your place.
Yes.
But let's see. So Harry assumes that he's going to be the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and so when they get to Hogwarts, and I know I'm glossing over some stuff, but that's all right. He finds out that actually Slughorn was hired to be the potions teacher, which means that the Defense Against the Dark Arts position was finally given to Snape.
And see okay, right before this book came out, Tim Peregrine on the Tavern was here visiting. He had come to the States. He was going to school at Tulane in Louisiana, and during his spring break, because his spring break was the week of his birthday, I bought him a train ticket from New Orleans to Birmingham, and he spent his spring break with me. And we were online, and they had released the cover, and we were looking at the cover for the UK edition, which are different than ours, and they're awesome, and I want a set of them. And I threatened to steal his while he was here. I tried to get him to trade with me, but he didn't go for it.
Oh, well.
Anyway, it was the cover of that version. It was just a black cover, and it had a book, Advanced Potions Making. And I remember saying, I was like, Snape got the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. There's going to be a new potions teacher. And he's like, no, you're crazy. I was like, no, look, Harry wanted to be an Auror. I was like, he couldn't do advanced potions because he didn't get high enough on his owl to get into Snape's advanced potions class.
Right.
I was like, why else would they put the advanced potions book on the cover unless Harry was going to get to take advanced potions, which means Snape's not teaching it.
Right. And that could have meant anything, because we knew that Snape was going to be doing something, and probably something dangerous, in the battle against Voldemort. So it could have been possible that he wasn't even going to be at Hogwarts, but turns out that he did get put into the Defense Against the Dark Arts position, which I believe it was Ron that said, well, that's good, because then he'll be gone by next year, because none of them ever last.
Well, yeah.
And
he wasn't wrong.
Yeah. And in this one we find out why. And we also find out because Dumbledore asks for Harry to take private lessons with him. And that is something that is not normal. I don't think Dumbledore teaches anything, typically.
No,
he's just the headmaster. But
he just sits and basks in his awesomeness.
Well, when he has that much awesomeness, it takes a while to bask in all of it.
Yeah. I mean, come on, the man's pet is a phoenix.
That's pretty darn awesome. But Harry finds out that these lessons are going to be basically trips down memory lane as he learns more about Voldemort.
Yeah.
Where Voldemort came
I love
from.
These lessons.
They're really, really, really cool. And basically, Dumbledore has been collecting memories from various people to learn more about Voldemort, to basically discover some of his weaknesses, if you can find any, and use that to figure out a way to defeat him. And also to verify some of his suspicions that he had.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the things he needs is a memory from Slughorn.
Right. But the first memory that they see is from a ministry official who was called to go to this wizarding household, if you want to call it that. It's really more of a hovel. But we meet the Gaunt family, which I was so disappointed that this part got left out of the movie, because
all of this.
Yeah, this whole section was left out, because you find out where Voldemort's family came from. And you meet the Gaunts, you meet Marvolo, who would be Voldemort's grandfather, and his two children, Morphin and Merope. And they're really awful, awful people. And they're poor. They're extremely poor because the family money had been squandered away long before Marvolo was ever born. But they're very, very proud of being the direct descendants of Salazar Slytherin.
Yeah, there's also something very important here.
Yeah.
And they say they're also descended from the Peverells.
Mm-hmm.
That's important in the next book.
And again, it's one of those things that's just dropped in there, and you can read right past it.
Yeah. Well, look, when I read Deathly Hallows, I had to go get this book and go back and read that part just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. So, I mean, and this is one of those things that I can understand why they didn't cover it in the movie, because there was so much to cover in this book and in the last book that it would have been almost impossible to give it the attention it needed to make it work right.
Yeah. That's true. I understand it.
That doesn't mean I have to like it.
No, it would have been really, really interesting, because you find out that Merope, which is the daughter, she's not a very good witch, and so her father thinks that she's a squib, which she's not really, but she's just been very neglected and abused, and her magic is pretty dormant because of that. But you find out that she is hopelessly in love with one of their neighbors who's a muggle, and his name is Tom Riddle. And her brother, Morphin, is in trouble because he's attacked this muggle, and you just find out that it's kind of a hopeless situation for her until her brother and her father get thrown in Azkaban. And after that, she kind of takes matters into her own hands. Now, we don't see a memory of this. It's more, a lot of these lessons, it's more conjecture than anything else, because they, number one, they don't know a lot of people who know that much about Voldemort, but even the ones that they do know, they're kind of afraid to talk about Voldemort. They don't want to share these memories. But
Well, no, I don't suppose I would either, because, you know, he might come kill me for it.
yeah. So you find out that he's where his mother came from. You find out in a later lesson that his mother died in childbirth and made her way to an orphanage, which is where he was born and where he lived until he was 11. Well, actually, he lived there during the summers after that. But you also learn that he was a very strange child.
Yes, he was very dark and
that's putting it mildly.
yeah, brooding and
Well, and
kind of evil.
yeah, he was already kind of evil, and he was just a little boy. Like, what
But yeah,
was one of the things he did? He killed somebody's pet rabbit.
yeah, and he would like torture other kids. Like he took 2 kids into this cave at the seacoast with him, and they were never quite right when they came back out.
Which there's a twisted little part of me that wants to know what happened in there.
Yeah.
Like, what could he have done? Because he would have been younger than 11, because it was before Dumbledore came to take him to Hogwarts. But you just wonder what a child that young could have been capable of. Because most magical children, they do manifest some kind of magical ability, but it's always spontaneous. It usually is some kind of an emotional response. And they never have any kind of control over it. It just sort of happens.
Right.
And Tom Riddle Jr. had some manner of control over it. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that he was special. And once Dumbledore came to tell him that he was a wizard, it was like all of a sudden all these things clicked with him, because he knew now, well, this is why I'm special. And I did think that it was kind of telling that he says, well, it must have been my father who was the wizard, because if it had been my mother, then she wouldn't have died.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of ways to feel really, really sorry for Voldemort, because, and this is kind of a similar discussion that like we had with Snape. I mean, he had a really rough time of it, growing up in the orphanage and basically having no one there to turn to. But it's what he did with that situation that,
Right.
well, brought us to where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, instead of trying to rise above, he just sort of wallowed in it.
Yeah.
And he let it make him bitter and evil.
Yeah. Trying to remember, we can go through some of the memories and the lessons and then cover some of the other stuff that's going on.
Yeah, they do several of those. I'm trying to...
Well, because the other thing, too, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, because this is a very different book, because the first 2 chapters have absolutely nothing to do with Harry.
True.
And you do find out that, number one, you find out that the Muggle Prime Minister knows about the wizarding world, although he's not really fond of it. And you find out that there is a new Minister of Magic, which is Rufus Scrimgeour.
Yeah.
And,
See, I did not like the dude that played him in the movie either. He's supposed to, you know, look like a lion, and he just kind of looked... Meh.
Well, and the problem with him in the movie for me is because it's the same actor who played Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. So every time I heard him talk, I just pictured, like, you know, tentacles.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, you know, distinguish between the two. It was weird, but you also find out in these first couple of chapters, because this is something important that leads to other scenes and situations in the book, is you find out that Draco Malfoy has been given some sort of assignment by Lord Voldemort. And his mother, Narcissa, and her sister, Bellatrix Lestrange, go to Snape's house to try and get Snape to Well, first they ask him to try and change Voldemort's mind, and Snape's like, "Are you crazy? That's
Yeah.
not gonna work." And then they made him make an unbreakable vow to try and help Draco, and if Draco can't do it, to fulfill the task that Draco was sent to perform, which Snape does. He promises to do this and makes the vow, which is apparently a really big deal in the wizarding world, because if you don't fulfill that vow, you will die.
Yeah.
So throughout the year, there's been a couple of attacks, as it were.
Yeah.
And nobody knows for sure who's behind it, but you do know that Draco's not doing well, because Harry mentions several times that he looks really tired. He's got really dark circles under his eyes. His face just kind of, gray, and he...
Well, Harry says they run into him in Diagon Alley.
Yeah.
And follow him to Nocturne Alley into Morgan and Burke's. And Harry sees him show something to the guy that works in there. Harry swears that it's his arm, that he's got the dark mark now. And Harry keeps going on and on and on about this all year, and nobody believes him.
Right.
Everybody keeps telling him he's crazy, that that's not going to happen, that Voldemort's not going to have a teenager. Well, guess what?
Yeah, you find out at the end that Harry wasn't as crazy as everybody thought he was.
Yeah, I mean, Harry has been right about stuff like this before. I mean, his track record with these things in the past 5 books should have been a clue.
Yeah, but, if people had taken him serious, then they would have caught Draco a lot earlier, so...
Yeah, they wouldn't have had this problem with the Ministry of Magic, basically trying to convince everyone that, Voldemort wasn't back, and they couldn't believe he was until Fudge, saw him in the Ministry, and
right.
Couldn't really deny it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, guess what? He's right there. Do you believe me now?
Been trying to tell you for a year.
Yeah. But...
That annoyed me, too, because, they made Harry out to be some sort of, liar, for one.
Well, like an attention seeker, that he was trying to make the most of his fame for what had happened with... I mean, basically, they're trying to say that he was trying to make himself famous because of his parents being murdered. It's like, okay, that's kind of horrible. But, yeah, and I did think that it was really, really kind of audacious of them for the Ministry to come after Harry and try and get him to basically throw his support in with the Ministry to help raise morale. And
yeah.
It's like, really? Where were you the entirety of the year before? Okay? You were treating him like dirt, and now you want him to basically be your cheerleader.
Boy.
Yeah. It's like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I love how he basically tells the minister to shove it in his ear.
Yeah. That was great.
Dumbledore's man through and through.
Yes, he is. But, let's see. So, there were a couple of attacks at school. The one that happened to Katie Bell.
Yeah, the cursed necklace.
Yeah, there was a cursed necklace that she accidentally touched barely through a teeny tiny hole in her glove, and that part, and I thought that part was really creepy in the movie too, where she rises up into the air, and then it looks like she's screaming, but no words are coming out, and then she slams to the ground, and that was creepy.
And the other attack, you're told in the book, you kind of get it in the movie too, that Romilda Vane is trying to slip Harry a love potion.
Yeah.
And Ron, who is dating Lavender, ends up eating Harry's chocolates and falling in love with Romilda Vane.
Yeah.
And Harry takes him to Slughorn. Now, this is after Dumbledore tells him he needs to get this memory from Slughorn, and he's asked Slughorn for it, and Slughorn got all offended and everything. And he takes Ron to, see if he can make an antidote for the love potion, and he does, and he gives him some of this, I think it was mead?
Yes.
That he was going to give as a gift, but decides to, share it with them and gives it to Ron, and it almost kills Ron, so Harry shoves a bezoar in Ron's mouth.
Yeah, because it had been poisoned. And let me just say that the whole love potion scene that they did in the movie, I thought Rupert Grint nailed it.
Yes.
It was hilarious.
You should see that part in Lego Harry Potter.
Oh, no.
he takes him to Slughorn, and he's like crawling all over Lego Slughorn, kissing on him. It's so funny. Seriously, if you are a Harry Potter fan, you have to play the Lego games because they're great. They're hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
But, we forgot. We completely... The potions book, the Half-Blood Prince. We kind of just jumped right over that.
Well, we've been jumping around a lot.
Yeah. When Harry first finds out that he can take potions, he doesn't have a book because he was expecting, that he was going to have, a higher grade to get into advanced potions making. But Slughorn will take an acceptable?
Yes. Or
instead.
I think it was actually because I think he got an exceeds expectations. And Snape told him he had to have an outstanding, but he managed to get an exceed expectations. And McGonagall tells him that Slughorn will accept that.
Right. So he doesn't have a book, and neither does Ron. So they both take potions, and there's a stack of books, and he says, you use one of those till you can get one from, Flourish and Blots. And Harry's has all these notes in the margins, and all these editations to the directions, and all this stuff. Well, the first potion they make, he follows these scribbles instead of the directions in the book, and his potion comes out perfect.
Yeah.
So he wins a bottle of Felix Felicis.
Which is liquid luck.
I want a bottle of this stuff.
Yeah, seriously.
But one thing I noticed, in the book, the bottle he got was enough for 12 hours, whereas in the movie, the bottle was enough for an hour.
Well, yeah.
Because he drank the entire bottle, and it wore off in about an hour. But in the book, he got enough for 12 hours, and he only used, half of it.
Right.
When he got the memory from Slughorn, he gave the other half to Ginny, Ron, and Weasley. Ginny and Ron and Hermione when he had to leave with Dumbledore so that they would have, something to protect them because he was afraid something was going to happen. He was right.
Yeah.
But, of course they kind of left out that part too. But anyway, he has this liquid luck. And, Dumbledore has told him that there's a memory he needs to get from Slughorn. Well, he's got the edited version of the memory, which is basically when Slughorn was at Hogwarts the first time, he was approached by Tom Riddle and asked if he knew anything about Horcruxes.
And Slughorn had edited that memory when Dumbledore asked for it, basically to yell at Tom Riddle, saying that he was going to come to a horrible end one day and that he knew nothing about Horcruxes and get out of his office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When that's not actually what happened.
Not at all.
But Dumbledore's like, we really need the unedited memory, that we can't proceed until you get it. Well, a bunch of other stuff starts happening, and Harry kind of forgets about this memory.
Right.
But when he finally decides to get it, he decides that he's going to use Felix Felicis to get it. And in the movie, this part makes me laugh because apparently you're not only lucky, you're high.
Yeah. He gets very happy.
And I love the part, he goes to Hagrid's because Aragog has died, which is no big loss if you ask me, but I don't like spiders.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm kind of in the camp with Ron Weasley.
I'm good with that. And actually, it's really funny because Rupert Grint really hates spiders too, so that's a little bit of life imitating art there.
Yeah. So he goes to Hagrid's and he runs into Slughorn, and Slughorn's like, "Oh, I can't let you wander the grounds alone." Well, then come with me, And in the movie, he gets down there, and Hagrid's talking about how nobody likes Aragog. It must have been da-da-da. And Harry's like, and don't forget the pinchers. And
Yeah.
he's making this little pincher motion with his hand. And that part always cracks me up. Because I'm just like, okay, Harry's high.
Yeah. No, that part was so funny. I mean, it's not quite as the same as it is in the book, but no.
I mean, in the movie, it makes it look like Slughorn is sneaking around to steal the venomous tentacula leaves.
Yeah.
But in the book, what's her name?
Oh, Professor Sprout.
Yeah, Professor Sprout is giving him a bunch of them.
Yeah.
He wasn't sneaking around, so. But yeah, he goes down. The reason Slughorn goes is to collect acromantula venom,
right?
Which is what Aragog was. And they end up drinking in Hagrid's hut, and Hagrid passes out, and Harry's talking to a quite sloshed Slughorn.
Yes.
And convinces him to give him the memory.
And there was something actually that was added in the movie that I thought was really beautiful. And it's been a while since I've seen it. I need to have like a big
about.
Harry Potter marathon. But while they're at Hagrid's hut, they Slughorn and Harry have this discussion, and Slughorn starts talking about Lily, Harry's mom, and she had been a favorite pupil of his, and he talks about a gift that she had given him, and it was a fish in a bowl, and then it would change into a flower. It would change into a lily.
No, it was. I just watched it the other day.
Yeah, fill it in because it was really pretty.
He came to his classroom one day, and there was a bowl full of water on his desk with a flower, a lily, floating in it.
Mm-hmm.
And as he watched, the lily sank to the bottom and turned into a fish. And it stayed a fish. And he said, he kept it for, years and years and years, and it was, he was really attached to it. But the day Voldemort killed Lily and James, the fish was gone. It wasn't there anymore. The magic was no longer there because the person that created it was dead.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot more touching and moving when Slughorn describes it in the movie.
Yeah. And like I said, I couldn't remember exactly what the specifics were. I just remember it was so pretty, and it was one of those things that it wasn't in the book, but you almost wish that it was because it was so well done. But because of this, Harry convinces Slughorn to give him the memory, which he does. And he runs up to Dumbledore's office and gives it to him. And they find out that indeed Slughorn did know about these Horcruxes and that he had told Tom Riddle about them. And basically what they are is it's a horrible spell that splits off a part of your soul and puts it inside an object of some kind.
Right.
And that way it kind of guarantees some sort of immortality because you can't be killed because part of your soul is tied to this other object. And in the memory, Riddle is asking, well, isn't 7 the most magical number, so wouldn't it be best to have a 7-part soul? And Slughorn in the memory, he was like, you crazy? That's horrible. Because the way to split your soul is to commit murder.
Right.
And so he's like, it'd be bad enough killing one person. You couldn't imagine killing 7. But it kind of confirms something that Dumbledore had thought all along, because he thinks that that's how Voldemort was able to survive the Avada Kedavra spell rebounding on him.
Right. Yeah, and it was so funny. This brought about another one of my crackpot theories.
Mm-hmm.
After I finished Half-Blood Prince, I was like, Harry is going to be the last Horcrux.
That was a popular one, actually.
Well, everybody that I was telling this were like, you're nuts. That's not possible. Harry's not going to be the final Horcrux because Harry would have to die. I'm like, do you remember the prophecy?
Yeah, but see, the thing is that it works because J.K. Rowling can make somebody have to die and then get away with it.
Yes. But I was like, Harry's going to be the final Horcrux. I said, when Voldemort killed Harry's parents and then tried to kill Harry and the curse rebounded on him, it split his soul and it came to rest in Harry. I said, think about it. Dumbledore has been saying for years that when Voldemort did that, he marked Harry as his equal and gave a part of himself to Harry.
Yeah, he said that almost word for word, actually.
Yes. I was like, Harry is the final Horcrux, people, and people are just like, you're nuts. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. But you find out that the diary from Chamber of Secrets was one of the Horcruxes. And you find out that Dumbledore has found another one of the Horcruxes, which was a ring that Marvolo Gaunt had owned. And after going through all of these memories, they've come up with a couple of other ideas. They think that one of them is a locket that had belonged to Slytherin, And it also belonged to the Gaunts at one time.
And, ended up in number 12 Grimmauld Place.
Yeah, well, we don't know that at this time, though. um, but yes, it did. And was mentioned just in passing.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was important or anything. It was just another piece of junk that they had to go through and throw away, but, whatever. And they also have a memory of when Tom Riddle, before he became Voldemort, he was working at Borgin and Burke's and was kind of going out to acquire some specialty items for them. And one of them was this cup that had once belonged to Helga Hufflepuff. So it kind of shows that he has a connection to Hogwarts because, as Dumbledore says, it was the place where he felt like he was home. That was his home. And I remember it was really interesting because Harry felt really uncomfortable hearing that because he feels the same way about Hogwarts. And he doesn't want to have anything in common with Tom Riddle, even though he does have several things in common, both of them being orphans, both of them being half-bloods, and a couple of other things that they go over. But so they're trying to speculate they're pretty sure that this locket and this cup are also Horcruxes, and they also decide that probably his big snake, Nagini, is also one.
Right.
And then something that belonged to either Rowena Ravenclaw or Godric Gryffindor. But they're not sure.
We know it's not the sword of Gryffindor.
Yeah, he said he was pretty sure it wasn't Gryffindor because the only known artifact left from Gryffindor was the sword, and he's like, that's not a Horcrux. So.
Oh, the ring.
Yeah, I said the ring.
Okay, apparently I wasn't listening.
No, we have the journal, the ring, because he said that it's a 7-part soul, so there's actually 6 Horcruxes.
Right. The journal, the ring, the Ravenclaw's diadem,
which we don't know about yet.
No.
So we have the journal, the ring, the locket.
Something of Ravenclaw's.
Well, no, the locket, the cup. No, the journal, the ring, the locket, the cup, the snake, and then something that belongs to either Ravenclaw or Gryffindor, which we later find out is the diadem, but they don't know that at this point. Right. So that's the 6. And Dumbledore mentions that he thinks he knows where there might be another one, but he's still working on that. But he does tell Harry that when he goes to destroy it, that Harry can come with him.
Right, which Harry's just like, really?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, after the last book with Dumbledore and let's not tell Harry anything or talk to him and let's keep him in the dark, and we found out that didn't work too well, he's decided full disclosure is the way to go.
It's about time.
Yeah.
But, let's see. Now what? I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, this is the one where him and Ginny finally get together.
Yes, okay. Yes, that is true.
Which made me happy.
That was a good thing.
And this is the one where it becomes obvious that Hermione has feelings for Ron.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of shipping going on in this book.
And this is the one where she made Tonks and Lupin kind of, or was that in Half-Blood Prince that she started that? Yeah,
that was at the very end of Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah, well, that had been in the fandom a long time. Everybody, since they introduced Tonks and Lupin, everybody was like, Tonks and Lupin, Tonks and Lupin. And then, it becomes a reality and they have a kid and yada yada. But anyway, we put Harry and Ginny together and Hermione starts admitting she has feelings for Ron and Ron's snogging Lavender all the time.
Yeah. See, there's a lot of craziness like that going on because Ginny decided that she had had a crush on Harry for so long, and she just decided that that's never going to happen, so I'm just going to go and enjoy myself. So she found out at the end of Order of the Phoenix that she was dating one of the Ravenclaws. And then you found out that she was dating Dean Thomas, which Ron wasn't too happy about. But then you find out that Harry's really not that happy about it either. And it's so cute because he tries to tell himself that, no, I feel very brotherly towards her because, she's, I'm practically in their family. So, of course, I'm wanting to be protective. And, yeah, just keep trying to convince yourself of that, Harry. It's not going to work.
Yeah, not convincing any of us either.
No. But it was really cute, the way that they were trying to do that. But Harry ends up being Quidditch captain, and so he gets to spend a lot of time with Ginny because she makes it onto the Quidditch team. And there's this whole point, too, where Harry keeps going back and forth with, she's Ron's sister. Yeah, but I like her. But she's Ron's sister.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll be happy. No, he's not going to be happy.
He's not going to like it. He'll kill me.
Yeah, but you find out that Ginny and Ron, they kind of get into this big argument because Ron's really being overprotective, and she's basically like, just because you're not doing it doesn't mean that it's disgusting, or something like that.
Yeah, and that's when the whole him and Lavender thing
Yeah,
starts.
so he decides that he's gonna have some fun of his own.
It turns out he's pretty okay with Harry and Ginny.
Yeah.
And he ends up breaking up with Lavender. She apparently starts to drive him crazy.
Well, she was just a little bit clingy.
Yeah, a little bit. But then, when Dumbledore finally figures out where this other Horcrux is and calls Harry to his office and they go get it, that was a very interesting scene. They go to the cave that was mentioned when we're talking about.
Before that, though, Harry had been trying to figure out what Draco Malfoy was up to. And he knew that he was somewhere he thinks that he was in the room of requirement. And he thought that he heard some kind of celebrating going on in there. And so he's worried that while Dumbledore's gone, and he's gone, that Draco's going to do something. So he gives the rest of the Felix Felicis to Ron and Hermione and tells them basically to keep an eye out for things. And then he goes off with Dumbledore.
And he was right. That was when everything started to happen.
Pretty much.
Basically, you find out that Draco has been trying to repair the vanishing cabinet in the room of requirement. And Harry had been in there. He knew it was in there because he hid his potions book in there.
Right.
And he mentions putting a wig and some kind of old tiara on this bust so he would know where he hid the book.
Again, she's
Pay
good.
Attention. Pay attention. Yeah, so that was, clue. This is the other Horcrux. Anyway, he's trying to fix this vanishing cabinet because it has a mate in Borgin and Burke's. But there's something wrong, it's broken, and if anything living tries to go through it, it dies. So he gets it fixed, and while Dumbledore and Harry are away, he lets the Death Eaters into Hogwarts.
Right.
And they go to this cave, and they, find the boat and get across the lake and get to this pedestal that has a basin that is full of a potion. And you can't scoop it out with your hand, you can't magic it away with your wand, you have to drink it. So Dumbledore drinks this potion, and apparently it does terrible things to you.
See, to me, this scene was one of the most frightening scenes in the whole book. And because before they leave, Dumbledore makes Harry promise that Harry will follow any order that Dumbledore gives him, no matter what.
Right.
And so he makes Harry promise that while he's drinking this potion, that if he becomes incapacitated from any reason, or no matter what the potion does, you have to keep making me drink it until it's gone, because that's the only way we're going to get it. And so immediately he just starts, at first it's just like he's having trouble breathing, and then he just starts screaming, and you can't tell what's going on or what he's seeing, but he's obviously seeing this terrible thing, and he's just saying, don't hurt them, and kill me instead, and all of this other stuff. And the whole time, Harry's forcing him to keep drinking this stuff, even though he knows that it's doing this to him, and keeps trying to have to convince him to take it, saying, this'll help, even though he knows it's not going to. I broke out in, goosebumps the whole way through it. I'm just like, it was so disturbing and so intense, and you didn't know what was going to happen. Your whole time you're thinking, well, gosh, what happens if Dumbledore can't get them out of there? Because they're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And I read a theory online somewhere. I don't remember where I read it. But there was a discussion about what was Dumbledore seeing.
Right.
And a lot of people were of the opinion that he was seeing somebody or something hurting his students.
Right.
Because that was why not them, don't kill them, kill me instead. that he was seeing somebody hurting or killing his students.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that kind of makes sense. Because, I mean, he was very attached to all of his students.
Right, and he wanted to protect them. But there was also, there was also some, and I can't remember if this question was ever answered or not, but after Deathly Hallows came out, there was some talk about that it was something to do with his family, and particularly his sister.
Yeah, I thought of that too.
But that's another discussion for another time.
Yeah.
So he finishes the potion, and Dumbledore kind of comes back to himself, and he says that he needs to have water. He's desperately thirsty, and Harry tries to make water out of the wand, but it doesn't work.
No.
So the only place to get it is the lake, which, oh yeah, we forgot to mention, it's full of dead people.
Yeah. Zombies. Inferi.
Yeah, basically they're zombies, who, once you touch the water, they kind of come to life and attack you.
Yep.
So they are able to escape just because Dumbledore's awesome and conjures this big, huge ring of fire. They grab the locket and get out of there as quickly as possible. They arrive in Hogsmeade, and Madame Rosmerta, the mistress of the Three Broomsticks, she sees them out there, and she's like, oh my gosh, you haven't heard, you haven't seen. The Dark Mark is in the sky over Hogwarts.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, we need brooms, we need to get going. In the meantime, Dumbledore is barely hanging on here. He's still severely weakened. And so he and Harry fly to the top of the astronomy tower, and Dumbledore, he kind of like slides down. He's like, okay, I need you to go get Severus. You need to go get Snape. And Harry's like, I'll go get Madame Pomfrey, I'll go get the nurse. He's like, no, you need to get Snape. You need to do it now. But before Harry can do that, you hear an Expelliarmus charm. But instead of being disarmed, Harry gets frozen, and he realizes that Dumbledore froze him. And he's under the invisibility cloak, so nobody can tell that Harry's there.
Right.
And in walks Draco Malfoy.
Yeah. And this is Draco disarming Dumbledore is very important in the next book.
Yes.
It's another one of those things that just sort of slipped in there on you.
Yeah.
But you find out basically that Draco's job is, 1, to fix the vanishing cabinet and let the Death Eaters in, and 2, to kill Dumbledore.
Right.
But he doesn't have the nerve. You can tell Dumbledore is talking him down from it. Dumbledore doesn't want him to do it. He doesn't want that stain on Draco.
Well, and the thing is, too, is I don't really think that Draco wanted to do it.
I don't either.
Especially as they were up there talking, because Draco talks a big game, but he's really not as strong in those convictions as he thinks that he is.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between saying, yeah, I'll kill somebody, and then actually being able to do it.
Right. And see, that's the unbreakable vow that Snape made, that if Draco couldn't do it, Snape would kill Dumbledore.
Yeah, because Snape was completely aware of what Draco's mission was.
Yeah.
And so the whole time, Dumbledore's talking to him about it, and Draco's saying, you don't understand, I have to do this. He's going to kill my family. And whether you like the Malfoys or not, I mean, obviously they are a pretty tight-knit family, because they try and look out for one another, they try and take care of each other. So, and I do have to say that I thought this was another part in the movie where I think that the actors nailed it, because Tom Felton as Draco in this scene was brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, you could feel him shaking and being so afraid and so unsure and not wanting to be in this situation, but feeling forced into it. And I mean, it was a really good performance, and he hadn't had a lot really to do of that nature in these movies. So you really saw what a good actor he was in that part, which I thought was really nice. But
But
he lowers his
yeah,
wand.
yeah. And then Snape shows up.
Well, and a bunch of other Death Eaters show up first.
Yeah. But this is the thing. Everybody, got all upset that Snape killed Dumbledore, which he does. He shows up, and they kind of do this in the movie, but they didn't do it as well as I thought they should have. In the books, it points out that there's a moment where Dumbledore and Snape just kind of stop and look at each other,
Mm-hmm.
and then Snape kills him. And the theory that I came up with after I read the book was, they're both very accomplished Legolamans.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see that there wasn't something that passed between them in that moment.
Right.
And I've always thought that it was Dumbledore telling Snape, look, I'm already dying because of this potion that I just drank.
Well, and Snape already knew that a little bit too because of the curse that Dumbledore had gotten when he broke the Horcrux of the ring.
Right.
With his hand being all shriveled up and nasty. But no, there was another part of the movie which I think, and this isn't a criticism on either of the actors, it was just a different way that they did it. But when they describe it in the book, Harry says that Snape's face was just filled with anger and loathing and just hate. And then he kills Dumbledore, and Dumbledore goes over the edge, and even if he hadn't shot him with Avada Kedavra, he was gonna die just from falling from the tallest tower of Hogwarts, because that's a really long ways to fall. But when they did it in the movie, it wasn't that cut and dry. You saw kind of hesitation and indecision and remorse almost on Alan Rickman's face when he was in that scene. And it just made it a little bit more ambiguous, because the whole point, once the Death Eaters leave because Dumbledore's dead and they don't know that Harry's even there, is because the whole way through Dumbledore kept saying, I trust Severus Snape. I know that he is on our side. And everybody is just shocked that Dumbledore could have been so wrong about something.
Right.
Because there is no question. There is no second guessing this, because Harry saw him looking for all the world like he hates Dumbledore. And at this point, number one, he was pretty angry with Dumbledore for putting him in this position anyway. And number two, he hated himself so much at this point because of what he had to do. So that's it. But you didn't know that at the time. It was all just, you thought for a long time that it was obvious that Snape was, they kept setting him up to be the bad guy, but he really wasn't. But then it's like, oh, wait, no, maybe he is.
Right.
Let's go round and round in circles with that.
Like I said, I always thought it was kind of a, I'm already dying. Do this so that Draco doesn't have to.
Right.
I've always thought that that's what that moment was. Because you can't tell me that the two very accomplished Legolamans like them wouldn't share something when she takes the time to obviously point out this moment to us. I kind of think we're supposed to draw that conclusion.
Right.
So I always thought that Dumbledore told Snape to do it.
Oh, we knew that he did, yeah.
It doesn't mean that, I have to like it. But yeah, I cried. I bawled like a baby when Dumbledore died. Actually, I think I cried worse at his funeral than I did when he actually died. But
well, it's so, like I said, it's so shocking because, Sirius died and that was pretty tragic, and when Cedric died, that was kind of a, oh my gosh, what happened moment. But Dumbledore was the rock. He was the one person that you could always count on as being there and being the leader of this fight against evil, and
he was the one person that Voldemort feared.
Yeah, so now what are you supposed to do?
Except, we're completely, everybody completely discounts the fact that he fears Harry too.
And I don't think we really understand that quite yet. But and then Harry goes after Snape and Draco as they're running away, and you find out that the potions book that Harry has been using that said that it was the property of the Half-Blood Prince actually had belonged to Snape.
Yeah.
That Snape is the Half-Blood Prince, and that's how Harry had gotten to be so good at potions, which is kind of a little twist in the ending there. But
Yeah.
and there were also some theories about at the end when Harry's trying to fight Snape and Snape is using Legamency on him to find out what Harry's going to be doing. And the whole time he's yelling, he's saying, "Until you learn to close your mind, you're never going to be able to fight me or fight the Dark Lord." And a lot of people think that even at that point, he's still trying to teach him, because he's telling him what he needs to know. He's like, you can't just have your emotions being an open book, and you have to learn how to close your mind, or the Dark Lord's just going to eat you for breakfast.
Right. But the thing is, Harry can't ever really completely close his mind to Voldemort because, little piece of Voldemort's soul kind of sticking in there.
Well, yeah, that's true.
We don't know that.
Nobody knows that at the moment.
But the fact of the matter is, he can't. It's not possible for him to do that to Voldemort. So.
Yeah. But that was that whole part. It was such a shock and so difficult to even process.
Yeah.
And then you have the funeral, which is horribly sad, but at the same time, Harry starts getting really nostalgic because they're talking about closing the school. And by the end of it, and I love this part so much, by the end of it, he says, even if the school's open, I'm not going to be here next year because I have a job to do.
Right. He's finally turning 17, and Dumbledore wanted him to find the rest of the Horcruxes.
Yeah, Dumbledore gave him a job to do, and he was going to do it. And the part that I absolutely loved was when Ron and Hermione basically say, "Yeah, we're coming with you," and Harry's like, "No, you can't do that." And I think it was Hermione who said, "We've made our decision, and we made our decision a long time ago. We are with you to the end of this." And that's just the way it is.
Right.
And we will stay with you until the end. And that's when you know that book 7 was going to be a completely different book than what we had previously experienced.
And it was. It's probably my favorite book out of the whole series.
It's so hard for me to pick my favorite book of the whole series. It's my favorite book of the series is whichever one I'm reading at the moment. I mean, especially as we've been going back and rereading these, I've been forgetting a lot of the stuff because it's been a while, and it's just it's all so good. But we will get into book 7 next week. Yes. Because there's a lot of stuff that happens in book 7.
Yeah, I was so glad that they split that one into 2 movies.
Oh yeah, there were so many little loose ends that they had to tie up, and then other ends that they had to invent and then tie up because they left so much out.
Yeah.
But eventually it mostly worked.
Oh, another one I want to point out that this is in the book. When they get the locket out of the basin and everything calms down and Harry has a chance to open it, there's a letter inside it to the Dark Lord. Somebody's already stole the Horcrux. It's like, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead, but I took your Horcrux and I'm going to destroy it. And it's signed R.A.B.
And oh my gosh, the speculation that went through the fandom when we couldn't figure out who R.A.B. was.
Even though we were given the information we needed.
Yep, way back in book 3.
To know who it was.
But did we pay attention to it? No, because we didn't think it was important at the time. Yeah, but more on that next week, I think.
Yep.
We should probably go ahead and wrap it up because, like I said, this book, there was so much stuff that we didn't cover, again, because there's so many things to go through in there. So if anybody hasn't, at this point, if you're still listening and you haven't read any of the Harry Potter books, I found out, because I've been talking about it on my blog, that there are still a lot of people who haven't read these books. And, oh my gosh, you've got to. Yeah. You just have to. They are so, so good. And so next week we will be wrapping up our Harry Potter celebration with Deathly Hallows. So be sure to join us for that. But I think
And now that we've actually discussed this one, I can start reading Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to start it tonight, actually, as we're...
I probably will, too.
Because I didn't want to start it and get distracted on anything that was in Half-Blood Prince.
I've been finished with Half-Blood Prince for a week.
Yeah, I finished it a couple days ago. I've been trying to pace myself out so I don't get too far ahead.
Well, I couldn't stop when I started.
Yeah, I know. It's hard. They're so good.
I'm gonna have... Okay, I'll start Deathly Hallows tonight. I'll probably be done in like 2 days.
Yeah. It has that effect. But anyway, so be sure to join us next week for that. If you'd like to contribute to our discussion with any of the Harry Potter books that we have discussed so far. Also, for the episode next week, if anybody remembers back when Deathly Hallows came out, there were tons of theories about what was going to happen with Book 7, and if you could, I'd like to try and collect as many of those as possible and talk about them a little bit, because there were so many, and some of them were absolutely insane. And, so some of the crazy ones, we'd love to get some of those too, but send those to us. You can email them to bibliophiles.podcast@gmail.com, or you can send them to us on Twitter. We are at BibAnonPodcast, or you can always leave them as comments at our official website, which is www.bibliophiles-anonymous.com. Be sure to go there. You can see the show notes for the episodes. You can see the new Harry Potter cover art for the new books that are going to be coming out, and they are gorgeous. Like I said,
they really are.
Like I said, we just posted the one for Half-Blood Prince. That was pretty much perfect timing, I thought.
Yes.
It just came out, and we're talking about it now. So check that out, and also check out Jess's book reviews for some of the ARCs that she's been getting from NetGalley.
There should be a new one up next week.
Okay, awesome.
Should be posting the Artifact one next week.
All right. So be sure to go look for that. And I think that's going to do it.
Yep, I think that'll cover it.
All right. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next week for Deathly Hallows.
Bye. Yay.
Bye.
Bye.